In this video, we are going to look at several different dosage calculations. Before we get started, there are some abbreviations that are used on oral medication drug orders that you should be aware of. So if you see PO, that means by mouth, and then QD means every day, QOD, every other day, BID is 2 times a day, the B standing for by, TID, the T standing for try, is 3 times a day, QID is 4 times a day, and then you might see one for so many hours. So Q, and then you'll see a number H. So something like Q6H would mean every 6 hours. And then PRN means as needed. So when we're solving these calculations, it's important for you to know how often the medication needs to be taken so you can describe or give out enough medication for them to take over that given time. So if it's twice a day, obviously you're going to give 2 times the single dose, 3 times a day, 3 times, 4 times a day, 4 times. But when it comes to every so many hours, you'll need to figure out how many times they'll have to take that medication in a day. So based on 24 hours. So for every 6 hours, you would do 24 divided by 6 is 4 times a day. If it's every 4 hours, then that's 6 times a day, and so on. And then if it's followed by PRN, that means as needed. So if they don't need to take it every 4 hours or every 6 hours, they don't have to, but you still need to administer as if they will have to every 6 hours or every 4 hours. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out how much medication you need to give them or prescribe to them over an amount of time. Some other rules that you need to think about when it comes to doing math with medications is that our normal rounding rules don't necessarily apply. So as you're doing any sort of dosage calculations, you really need to be thinking about what the question is asking and logically thinking through whether your answer makes sense and what your answer will have to be in terms of the form. So for example, if you're working with tablets, now tablets are a solid, and so you have to give a whole number of tablets out when you administer them. And when you're looking at how many tablets per dose, that also needs to be as a whole number, unless it says they are scored. So if it says it is a scored tablet, then that means it has that line down the tablet, and so you can split them in half. So in the scored tablets case, you can give half a tablet, but otherwise tablets are whole. If it's a capsule, the capsule are the ones that have the medication inside the tablet. So sometimes it's a powder, sometimes it's a liquid, but either way, you can't cut those in half. It can't be divided, and so if it's a capsule, it has to be a whole number. If it's a liquid, you can give those in fractional amounts. Normal rounding rules would apply with liquids. In most cases, we're going to round down because you don't obviously want to overdose your patient, and so you need to make sure that you are rounding down. However, whatever you give out, if you've rounded that number, it cannot be more than a 10% variation between what they've ordered and what you've administered. And so there's some different rules and things we need to think about as we are rounding and giving our answer when it comes to medications. In terms of actually solving the medications, you're going to solve it essentially the same way we have for our conversion problem. So you're essentially converting from a unit like milligrams, micrograms, milliliters, microliters into tablets or capsules. You're essentially doing a conversion there. Now, there is sort of a formula that we can give for this. It's the amount of medication that you need to give is equal to the dosage times the quantity over the strength on hand. But again, this is going to look exactly like our conversion problem, so I wouldn't worry about trying to memorize a formula here. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Let's look first at some examples in solid form. So capsules, gel, tablets, caplets, all of these type of medications where it's like a solid. So for example, you consider the following drug order. So we have Lamictal for 200 milligrams, POBID. Assume that you have 100 milligram tablets. So let's break down what this means. So the first part here, that is the name of the medication. We then have how much of that medication is in ordered per dose. So this is per dose. PO means by mouth. And then we have BID, which means twice a day. Okay, so they're taking 200 milligrams by mouth twice a day. And we want to know how many tablets is that. We have 100 milligram tablets, and we're going to figure out how many tablets per dose. Now, if it's per dose, we're not worried about how many times a day they're taking it or how they're taking it. We're only concerned with the actual milligrams per dose. And so if I am following my formula here, I start with what I'm given, so my 200 milligrams, and I'm converting that into tablets. My conversion is 1 tablet is 100 milligrams. So I'm going to do 200 milligrams times 1 tablet over 100 milligrams, which equals out to 2 tablets. And in this case, it gives us a nice whole number, and so we don't need to worry about rounding. So you can see that we have a formula here, but really it's the same as our conversion questions. We're taking the 200 milligrams, and we're figuring out how many tablets. There's 100 milligrams per tablet, so I need 2 tablets per dose. Okay. Now the question could also say for 5 days, and so you could figure out how many do they need to take overall over all the 5 days. Right, so let's say it's for 5 days. Well, it's twice a day for 5 days. So they need 10 doses. There's 2 tablets per dose. So I'm going to prescribe 20 tablets in total for them to use over those 5 days. Okay, so our first step with these questions is looking at how many tablets per dose. To do that, we're specifically looking at how many grams, or what's the medication per dose, and what tablets or what medication strength I have on hand. And then I'm going to use the other information in the drug order to figure out, well, how many then per day, how many across the whole prescription. Okay, let's look at another example. A doctor prescribes a Percocet, which is oxycodone and acetaminophen. And you'll notice that it has it in brackets with a slash. So when it's giving me the strength of the medication, in this case 5/650, what it's saying is 5 oxycodone to 650 acetaminophen. And it's PO by mouth, Q4H, which is every 4 hours. PRN means as needed, but again, we're going to assume they're going to need it every 4 hours. It's a 7-day supply, and the pharmacist has the following dosages on hand. So let's kind of break this down part by part. The first question says, which tablet should the pharmacist choose to fill the order? So when we're looking at which tablet we want to use, we want to choose the one that's going to get us the exact or as close to the dosage as possible using the least amount of tablets. So even though one tablet might get us there exactly, if they have to take 10 tablets to get there, we don't want to choose that one. It's not strong enough. So we want to choose the one that uses the least amount of tablets but gets us to exactly what the doctor prescribed. So if we look at our first tablet here, which is 325, right? If I give them 2 tablets, I get to 4,650. So I'm timesing each of those numbers by 2. And so it gets me to 4,650, which is close, but I'm a little bit low on the oxycodone side. So let's look at our other tablets there. We have 2.5 by 325. If I give 2 tablets of those, we get to 5,650, which is exactly what we're looking for. And if I look at my final one and I give 2 tablets, then it's going to give me 8,650, which is way too much of the oxycodone side. And so this one is the right one. So therefore, you would use the 2.5, 325 tablet. So that one is going to get me exactly what the doctor has ordered, and it only uses 2 tablets each dose, which is fine. I'm not having them take, way too many tablets in one dose to get there. So that one is the best option of the 3 that I have. The second question says, how many tablets should the patient take per dose? So let's remember I have 2.5 by 325 tablets, and I want to get to 5 by 650 for each dose. Remember, for each dose, we're just looking at the actual amount of medication we want in each dose. I'm not looking at how often they need to take it or how they're taking it. I'm only focusing on how much they need to take each time, which in this case is 560. And I've chosen the 2.5, 325 tablets. And so if I multiply that by 2, we saw that I get to my 5,650. So therefore, the patient needs 2 tablets per dose. So now that we know how much they need per dose, I'm looking at what is the maximum number of tablets the patient should take in one day. Now it's saying maximum because remember it showed as needed. And so it's saying they can take it every 4 hours, maximum every 4 hours as they're needed. So it's the maximum amount that they can take in one day. Okay, so they can take it every 4 hours as needed. So it's every 4 hours. So I'm going to divide 24 by 4, which says 6 times a day. So they can take this medication maximum of 6 times a day, and we're saying that they need 2 tablets for each dose. So I'm going to take my 6 times a day and times it by 2 tablets to get 12 tablets maximum a day. Okay, so they can take it every 4 hours, which is 6 times a day. There's 2 tablets each time, so then they can take a maximum of 12 tablets a day. And finally, how many tablets should the pharmacist then dispense to fill the whole prescription. So to do that, we need to figure out, well, how long are they taking this medication? And the question says a 7-day supply. So if they can take a maximum of 12 tablets a day, we're giving them a 7-day supply, which is 84 tablets total if they were to take as many as they could across those 7 days. Okay, let's look at oral medication in the liquid form. So remember, with liquid, we don't need to necessarily worry about rounding because we can give them syringes where they can do fractional amounts within the syringe. And so normal rounding rules apply as long as when we're rounding, we're not going more than 10% in either direction. Okay, so a patient with bronchitis is given a 10-day prescription. So I'm going to highlight that. So it's 10-day prescription for Biaxin, 375 milligrams. And again, that is per dose. PO, which is by mouth, every 12 hours. The pharmacist has an oral suspension of this medication on hand with a concentration of 250 milligrams for 5 milliliters. So if they take 5 milliliters of this medication, they will get 250 milligrams of the medicine that they need. So how many milliliters should the pharmacist instruct the patient to take per dose? And how many milliliters should the pharmacist dispense in order to fill the prescription? Okay, so again, we always start with per dose. How many milliliters should they take per dose? Well, we want them to take 375 milligrams each dose. And the medication that we have is 250 milligrams per 5 milliliters. We can think of that like a conversion rate. I want to convert from milligrams to milliliters, and the strength is my conversion rate. So I'm going to multiply that, put my milligrams on the bottom, and my milliliters on top. And so on the calculator, what I'm going to do is do 375 times 5 divided by 250. And I get 7.5 milliliters. Now we don't need to worry about rounding here because we can give them a syringe in order to take exactly 7.5 milliliters. So we don't need to round, and so I don't need to worry about this 10% variation. So 7.5 milliliters per dose. So 7.5 milliliters of this medication will give them 375 milligrams. So that's how much they need to take per dose. The second part of the question is, well, then how much do you need to give them in order to last the whole amount of time? So we know that they're taking it every 12 hours. So if we do 24 divided by 12, that's 2 times a day. So if they're taking it 2 times a day, and they're taking 7.5 milliliters each time, that means they're taking 15 milliliters per day. We also know that we want to give them a 10-day supply. So I'm going to times that by how much they need to take per day. So I need to give them 150 milliliters to fill the prescription. So with these types of questions, essentially the pathway we're using, the steps we're taking is always how much per dose, so how much per day, so how much in total for the whole prescription. How much per dose, how much per day, and therefore how much in total. So this first part tells me how much per dose. I'm then using how often they're taking it to tell me how much per day. And then I'm looking at, well, how many days do I need to give them in total? So dose, day, and then total. Medications can also be given to us rather than a liquid strength or a tablet strength. We might be given how much we need to give the patient based on their body weight. But the process is the same. Whether we're using a concentration or we're using body weight, we can think of these as sort of like a conversion from medication to how much liquid or how many tablets we need to give them. So for example, a physician orders methylprednisone, 1.2 milligrams per kilogram. So there is my concentration. That's the per dose that they need to get. It's PO by mouth, QID. So that means 4 times a day. For a pediatric patient, so a child with asthma, if the patient weighs 45 pounds and the drug is available in 16 milligram scored tablets, how many tablets will the patient receive in a single dose? So let's break this down. The doctor has ordered 1.2 milligrams per kilogram for this patient. The patient is 45 pounds. So our first thing we need to do is figure out, well, how many milligrams does this patient need to take per dose? Before I can worry about how many tablets that is, I need to first worry about, well, if it's 1.2 milligrams per kilogram, how much is this patient going to get each dose? So we need to convert 45 pounds into kilograms, and we know that 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So we can do 45 pounds times, I'm going to put my pounds on the bottom so they cancel out, which means I'm going to divide 45 by 2.2, which is 20.454545, and so on. And so I'm going to write this down as 45 repeated kilograms, and I'm not going to round that answer. We don't want to round because that is going to change our answer next. So we want to keep the whole number until the very end. Now the doctor has ordered 1.2 milligrams for every kilogram. So we're going to take this whole number that we have here, 20.454545, and so on. And again, I'm going to put my kilograms on the bottom, and it's 1.2 milligrams per 1 kilogram. So I'm going to take my whole weight and times that by 1.2. And I get 24.5454 milligrams. So I know that the doctor has ordered this patient, specifically for their weight, must get 24.545454 milligrams per dose. The question is, how many tablets is that? Well, the tablets that I have been given is 16 milligrams scored tablets. And that scored is important because it means that I can do half a tablet if need be. So let's do 24.54 milligrams times 16 milligrams in 1 tablet. So you can see I've almost created my own conversion rate there. And so I'm going to divide 24.54 by 16. And I get 1.534 and so on tablets. So I'm going to round this to 1.5 tablets. 10% of this number is going to be 0.1534. So if I divide by 10, that will tell me my 10%. And I'm only rounding the 3. I'm kind of cutting off that 3. And so 1.5 is within 10% of 1.534. And so I know that that's an appropriate rounding. Plus I've rounded down. So I know that's going to help make sure there's not any overdose there of the patient. I'm not giving the patient too much medication. So I've rounded down, but it's also within 10%. So I know that that's a safe rounding there. So the patient will get 1.5 tablets per dose. Finally, medication can also be given by body surface area. Similar concept to weight and to all of the other concentrations. You're going to do this based on conversions. We can use our conversion strategy in order to solve this out, but it might be given by body surface area. So a physician orders haloperidol 1.5 milligrams per meter squared body surface area. So if it's a meter squared, that's our body surface area. BID, so this is per dose. This is twice a day. For a patient with severe schizophrenia, how many milliliters of an oral suspension will the patient receive per dose if he has a body surface area of 1.98 meters squared and the concentration of the solution on hand is 2 milligrams per milliliter? So again, let's break this down into what has been ordered. So ordered is 1.5 milligrams per meter squared, and the patient is 1.98 meters squared. So before we try and figure out how many milliliters, we first need to figure out, well, what is the actual dose for this patient? So if I start with what I have been given, the patient is 1.98 meters squared, and the doctor has ordered 1.5 milligrams for 1 meter squared. So I'm using that as my conversion rate. And so I'm going to do 1.98 times 1.5 to get 2.97 milligrams for this particular patient. Now, the concentration on hand, so the medication that we have, is 2 milligrams per milliliters. So I can use that in order to convert from milligrams to milliliters. So I'm going to use my 2.97 milligrams, and it's 1 milliliter for 2 milligrams. So, and I'm using this as my conversion rate with my milligrams on the bottom. So I'm going to do 2.97 divided by 2 to get 1.485 milliliters per dose. Now, the next part of this question we'd need a bit more information for in terms of rounding. You'd have to look at, what syringes do we have available? If we have syringes that go to half a milliliter, then I might round this to 1.5 milliliters, which would still be within 10%, but it would depend on what syringes I have and how accurate that patient could be with measuring to determine how I would round this answer. So for now, we'll just leave it at 1.485 milliliters per dose. Okay, we could also then continue this question by saying, how much do I need to give them per day? How much would they take per day? Which in this case, it's twice a day, so I would times that by 2. And then, maybe how much would I give them over a certain amount of time? So if it's a, 10-day prescription we give them, then you would times that by 10 and so on. Okay, so I want you to rate yourself here, a thumbs down if you're having trouble using your conversion skills to solve dosage problems, a finger pointed if you need some more practice, and a thumbs up if you're like, I've got this, I understand how to do these dosage problems, I don't need any more help or practice.